The ultimatum. The stars had never seemed more distant than they did on that autumn morning, when everything changed. Captain Maria Volkov stood in the observation deck of the Terran Defense Station Horizon, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. She was 42 years old, with sharp gray eyes and dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. For 15 years, she had commanded defensive operations around Earth, dealing mostly with asteroid redirections and occasional rogue satellite. Nothing in her career had prepared her for what was about to happen. The sensors screamed first. Then every screen in the command center lit up with warnings. Something massive had just appeared in near-Earth space, bypassing every early warning system humanity had built. Maria ran to the bridge, her heart pounding. When she saw what had arrived, she stopped breathing for a moment. The ship was incomprehensible in its scale. It stretched across the sky like a floating mountain, blotting out stars. Its surface was dark metal covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move. Smaller vessels surrounded it, each one larger than any ship humanity had ever constructed. This was technology centuries beyond anything Earth possessed. Commander Rafael Santos appeared beside Maria. He was a compact man of 38 with nervous energy and brilliant tactical instincts. His hands were already moving across control panels, gathering data. "Captain," we are being hailed. "Multiple frequencies. They want to talk." "Put it through," Maria said quietly. Her voice was steady even though her mind was racing. She had trained for first contact scenarios, but those training sessions always assumed humanity would have some warning, some time to prepare. This was something else entirely. The view screen activated. The being that appeared was tall and skeletal, with elongated limbs and a head that reminded Maria of a praying mantis. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to shimmer. For eyes arranged vertically along its narrow face regarded her with what might have been contempt or boredom. When it spoke, a translation device rendered its clicking language into flat, emotionless English. "I am Legate Zarthian of the Dominion Sovereignty. Your species has been observed and catalogued. Your world has been evaluated. You will now receive the terms of integration." There was no greeting, no diplomacy, no acknowledgement that this was first contact between two civilizations. Just cold declaration. Maria felt anger flash through her fear. She was a military officer and had dealt with arrogant commanders before, but this was different. This creature spoke as if humanity was already conquered. "We are Captain Maria Volkov of the Terran Defense Initiative. On behalf of Earth, I welcome contact with your civilization. Perhaps we can establish diplomatic relations and mutual understanding." The legate made a sound that the translator rendered as dismissive. "You misunderstand your situation. This is not negotiation. This is notification. Your world will provide 40% of all extractive resources annually. You will provide 5 million of your population for labor integration every cycle. You will dismantle all military capabilities beyond basic planetary security. In exchange, the Dominion will provide protection and technological guidance. You have 96 hours to accept these terms." Maria stared at the screen. Around her, the bridge crew sat frozen in shock. These were not terms of alliance or cooperation. These were demands of subjugation. "And how many other worlds have accepted these terms?" she asked carefully. The legate's eyes blinked in sequence from top to bottom. 643 species currently serve the Dominion. All have found prosperity and purpose within the sovereignty. Refusal is illogical and will result in consequences. You have 96 hours. The transmission ended abruptly. The bridge erupted in noise. Officers were shouting questions, demanding answers, trying to understand what had just happened. Maria held up her hand for silence. "Get me a secure line to Director Chinwei at Global Command. Wake up every head of state on the planet. And someone find Dr. James Park. We need his expertise immediately." Within 6 hours, every significant leader on Earth had gathered in the emergency council chamber deep beneath Geneva. Some attended in person, others through holographic projection, but all were present. Director Chunwei stood at the center of the circular room. He was 65 years old, a veteran diplomat who had spent his career preventing wars and building bridges between nations. His face showed the weight of this moment. "You have all seen the transmission. Chen said. His voice carried across the silent chamber. You know what they're demanding. Before we discuss our response, I want Dr. Park to share what he's learned. Dr. James Park stepped forward. He was a lean man of 50 with wire-rimmed glasses and the distracted air of someone who lived more in data than the physical world. He had spent his life studying xenobiology and exosociology, preparing for this day even though most people thought it would never come. His hand shook slightly as he activated the holographic display. I have been analyzing the data packet that accompanied their transmission, Park said. It contains historical records of their previous integrations. 643 species across 417 worlds. The oldest integration occurred 9,000 years ago. Not a single species has ever been released from Dominion control once they accepted terms. What about species that refused? Asked President Elena Koslov of the European Federation. She was a woman who had built her career on standing firm against intimidation. Park's expression darkened. 17 species refused initially. All 17 were subjected to what the Dominion calls correctional intervention. Their worlds were bombarded until resistance collapsed. Casualties ranged from 30 to 70% of the population. Eventually, all 17 accepted the terms anyway. The chamber filled with angry voices. Some leaders demanded immediate surrender to save lives. Others insisted that living as slaves was not living at all. General Marcus Webb, commander of the Unified Defense Forces, slammed his fist on the table. We cannot simply hand over our freedom because they threaten us. Humanity has faced extinction events before and survived. By luck, not by choice, countered Prime Minister Raj Sharma of the Asian Alliance. We have never faced an enemy with this level of technology. Their single ship could destroy our entire fleet in minutes. Captain Volkov, who had been invited to provide military assessment, spoke up. With respect, Prime Minister, you are correct about their technological advantage, but I have been reviewing their tactical patterns from the historical data. They have never fought a species that continued resisting after the initial bombardment. They expect compliance through overwhelming force. They have never adapted to prolonged resistance because they have never needed to. What are you suggesting? Director Chen asked. I am suggesting that they are used to victory through intimidation. They show up, make threats, destroy something symbolic, and species surrender. They have done this successfully for 9,000 years. But that means they have never actually had to fight a determined enemy. Their tactics are stale. Their strategies are predictable. They are powerful but potentially vulnerable to unconventional warfare. Admiral Patricia Foster leaned forward. She was a senior naval commander, a woman of 53 who had redesigned Earth's space defense network. And if we resist and they destroy our cities, kill millions, are you prepared to accept that responsibility? Maria met her eyes steadily. If we surrender and they take our children to work in their mines, take our resources until we have nothing left, watch our species slowly die as a tributary state, are you prepared to accept that? At least if we fight for something. The debate continued for 3 days. Leaders argued passionately on both sides. Dr. Park presented more analysis showing that tributary species had suffered population decline, cultural erasure, and eventual genetic drift as they were bred for specific labor purposes. The Dominion did not preserve species. It consumed them slowly. Military commanders outlined scenarios. They could hurt the Dominion fleet badly with surprise attacks and guerrilla tactics, but they could not win a conventional war. Scientists proposed desperate plans involving nuclear weapons, kinetic strikes, even biological agents, though all agreed these were acts of desperation with uncertain outcomes. Through it all, something remarkable happened. Despite different cultures, different political systems, different histories, humanity began to unify. Old enemies found common cause. Ancient rivalries seemed petty compared to the threat before them. By the end of the third day, something unprecedented occurred. Every single nation on Earth voted the same way. Director Chun Wei recorded the response himself. Captain Volkov stood beside him, representing the military. Dr. Park stood on his other side, representing the scientific community. Behind them, the flags of every nation hung together in the emergency council chamber. Chin took a deep breath and activated the transmission. Legate Zarthian of the Dominion Sovereignty, we have received your demands. We have consulted as a species. Every nation has voted. Every voice has been heard. Our response is unanimous. He paused for just a moment, and in that pause, the entire future humanity hung in balance. No, the transmission ended. Chin turned to look at the assembled leaders. Some had tears in their eyes. Others looked terrified, but all of them stood together. Whatever comes next, we face it as one species, Chin said quietly. We may die free, or we may survive free, but we will not live as slaves. 900 light-years away, aboard the Dominion flagship, Legate Zarthian stared at the blank screen where the transmission had just ended. Around him, his staff stood in confused silence. The legate's vertical eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of genuine confusion in his species. He had delivered the integration terms to hundreds of worlds over his long career. He had seen fear, anger, desperate bargaining, and eventual submission. He had never, in 2 centuries of service, heard a species simply refuse without conditions or counteroffers. Play it again, he ordered. His translator device could not possibly have rendered the message correctly. They played it again. The answer was the same. No, just one word. Absolute and final. The legate opened a priority channel to the sovereign assembly on the Dominion homeworld. The faces of the 5 ruling sovereigns appeared on his screen. They were ancient beings, each 1,000s of years old, preserved through technologies that lesser species could only dream of. They had guided the Dominion to dominance over a quarter of the galaxy. They had never known defeat. Sovereign Talmor, eldest of the 5, spoke first. Her voice was like wind across ice. Legate Zarthian, you should have reported the successful integration by now. Explain this delay. There is no delay. Sovereign, the humans have responded. They have refused our terms. The chamber fell silent. Then Talmor made a sound that might have been laughter. Refused? How entertaining. What are their counterdemands? What concessions do they seek? There are no counterdemands. Sovereign. No conditions. No negotiations. They simply said no and ended the communication. The 5 sovereigns looked at each other. In their thousands of years of combined existence, they had crushed rebellions and integrated empires. But they had never encountered a species that simply refused without trying to bargain for better terms. This is unacceptable, declared Sovereign Venkar, the military strategist among them. They are a primitive species with barely functional spaceflight. They cannot refuse us. Clearly, they do not understand their situation. I have studied their broadcasts and data. Zarthian said carefully. They understand perfectly. They know they cannot defeat us militarily. They know what refusal means. They chose it anyway. Then they are fools, Venkar said flatly. Deploy the subjugation fleet. Destroy one of their cities. They will learn quickly what defiance costs. Zarthian hesitated. With respect, sovereigns, I recommend caution. I have been reviewing their historical records. These humans are unusual. They have fought wars among themselves for thousands of years. They have killed each other in numbers that would end most species, yet they continue. They have survived planetary disasters, diseases, and near-extinction events. Their entire history is one of defiance against impossible odds. Every species has survived challenges. Talmor said dismissively, that does not make them special. It does not make them capable of resisting the Dominion. Perhaps not, Zarthian admitted. But when they delivered their refusal, they showed no fear. I have seen fear on 600 worlds. These humans showed none. They knew what they were doing. They knew what it would cost. And they said no anyway. Sovereign Venkar waved a thin appendage in dismissal. You overthink this, Legate. They are primitives who need education. The subjugation fleet will provide that education. Once they see our power demonstrated, they will beg to accept our original terms. As you command, Sovereign, Zarthian said. But inside his mind, doubt whispered. He had spent 2 centuries integrating species into the Dominion. He had learned to read fear and defiance and desperation. When he looked into the eyes of that human captain and that human director, he had seen something he had never encountered before. He had seen certainty. They knew they might die. They accepted it, and they refused anyway. The subjugation fleet began mobilizing immediately. 300 warships, each one a city-sized vessel of destruction. They would jump through hyperspace to Earth and make an example that would be remembered for millennia. The Dominion had never lost. The Dominion could not lose. It was a natural order of things. But as the fleet prepared to depart, Zarthian found himself reviewing the human historical records again. He read about something they called Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. He read about Britain refusing surrender while bombs fell on their cities. He read about resistance fighters in occupied territories who kept fighting even when victory seemed impossible. He read about a species that had faced extinction dozens of times and always, somehow, survived. And for the first time in his long career, Legate Zarthian wondered if the Dominion might have made a terrible mistake. On Earth, Captain Maria Volkov stood in the observation deck of Station Horizon and watched the stars. The alien ship still hung in orbit, waiting. She knew more ships were coming. She knew the Dominion would punish Earth for its defiance. She knew millions might die in the coming days. But she also knew something else. Humanity had said no to slavery. Every nation had voted together. Every person on Earth stood united for the first time in their fractured history. They had chosen freedom over survival, dignity over submission. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Commander Santos approached her quietly. Captain, all stations are reporting ready. Every ship we have is armed and positioned. Ground defenses are at maximum readiness. The civilian shelters are full. We are as prepared as we can be. Maria nodded slowly. Raphael, do you think we made the right choice? He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. My grandmother used to tell me a story about our ancestors. They lived under a dictatorship for decades. She said every day was a choice between keeping your head down and staying safe, or standing up and risking everything. Most days, people chose safety. But some days, enough people chose to stand. And on those days, dictatorships fell. I think today was one of those days, Captain, for our whole species. I hope you are right. Maria said, I hope we survive this. But even if we do not, at least we stood. The stars continued their eternal dance. Earth continued its rotation, and humanity waited for the storm it had chosen to face rather than kneel before. Somewhere in the darkness, 300 warships were coming to teach them the price of defiance. But Earth had already decided that some prices were worth paying. Freedom was one of them. The Dominion had conquered 643 species over 9,000 years. They had never failed. They had never been truly challenged. They were about to learn what it meant to fight a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. They were about to discover why humanity had survived when countless other species had failed. They were about to meet defiance made flesh. And in 96 hours, the galaxy would never be the same. The price of defiance. The subjugation fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of locusts descending on a harvest. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could crack continents. They arranged themselves in a sphere around Earth, a formation designed for maximum intimidation and total planetary coverage. Every city, every military installation, every defensive position was now within firing range of multiple vessels. Admiral Patricia Foster watched the enemy fleet from the command center of Terran Defense Station Olympus. She had commanded Earth's naval forces for 8 years, but she had never imagined facing something like this. Her entire fleet consisted of 42 combat vessels, most of them designed for patrol duties and asteroid defense. Against 300 Dominion warships, they were hopelessly outmatched. Captain Volkov's voice came through on the command channel. Admiral, all defense stations are reporting enemy targeting locks. They have weapons hot and ready. They are waiting for orders. Hold position, Foster ordered. Do not fire unless fired upon. Let them make the first move. We need to see what they do. Legate Zarthian broadcast on all frequencies. His translated voice echoed across every communication device on Earth. People of Earth, you have made an unwise choice. The Dominion does not accept refusal. You will now learn the consequences of defiance. We will demonstrate our power. Then you will be given one final opportunity to accept our terms. Resist further, and your world will be reduced to ash." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then 6 Dominion cruisers broke formation and descended toward the planet. Their target was immediately clear from their trajectory. They were heading for Jakarta, a sprawling megacity of 14 million people. The city had been evacuated as much as possible over the past 4 days, but millions remained unable or unwilling to leave their homes. Commander Rafael Santos was on the ground in Jakarta, coordinating the final evacuation efforts. He stood on a rooftop and watched the 6 massive ships descend to the clouds like falling mountains. Around him, his emergency response team worked frantically to get the last civilians into underground shelters. "All units, this is Santos. Fall back to the shelters now. We are out of time." He grabbed the arm of a young woman who was trying to carry her elderly father. "Let me help." His team moved quickly, efficiently, pulling people to safety even as the alien ships grew large in the sky. The bombardment began without warning. Beams of superheated plasma lanced down from the Dominion cruisers, carving through buildings like they were made of paper. Entire city blocks vanished in seconds, replaced by molten craters. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar of destruction that drowned out everything else. Santos felt the heat wash over him even from blocks away as the city burned. He got the last civilians into the shelter entrance and turned to see one of the cruisers hovering directly above his position. For a moment, he thought he was about to die. Then the ship moved on, targeting another section of the city. Santos realized with cold clarity that they were not trying to destroy Jakarta completely. They were making a statement. They were showing Earth what would happen to every city if defiance continued. The bombardment lasted 12 minutes. When it ended, 30% of Jakarta was gone. The death toll was estimated at 2 million people, despite the evacuation efforts. Smoke rose into the atmosphere in a pillar that could be seen from space. The Dominion ships returned to orbit, their demonstration complete. Legate Zarthian broadcast again. "This is the consequence of defusal. Accept our terms, or this will happen to every major city on your world. You have 24 hours to comply." The transmission ended, and the galaxy waited for Earth's response. In the emergency council chamber, Director Chunwei stood before the assembled leaders. Many of them had tears streaming down their faces. They had just watched millions of their citizens die. The holographic feed from Jakarta still showed on the displays images of destruction and suffering that would haunt them forever. "Jakarta was only the beginning," Chen said quietly. "If we refuse again, they will destroy more cities. Maybe all of them. The question before us is the same as it was 4 days ago, but now we have paid the first installment of the price. Do we continue to pay it, or do we surrender?" President Koslov spoke, her voice shaking with grief and rage. "My people are dead, millions of them. If we surrender now, they died for nothing. If we continue, more will die. How do we make this choice?" Dr. James Park stood up. He looked exhausted, like he had not slept in days. "I have been studying the Dominion subjugation records more carefully. In the 17 cases where species initially refused, the Dominion followed the same pattern. Demonstrate power, demand submission, escalate if refused. But in every case, the species surrendered after the first or second demonstration. The Dominion has never needed to proceed beyond that point. They have no experience with species that continue fighting after significant casualties." "What are you saying?" asked General Webb. "I am saying that their strategy assumes we will break. They are following a script that has worked for 9,000 years. But if we do not break, they may not know what to do next. Their entire military doctrine is built on overwhelming force leading to quick submission. They have never fought a prolonged war, because they have never needed to." Admiral Foster leaned forward. "So if we keep refusing, we force them into territory they have never explored. They will have to adapt, innovate, change their strategies, and that creates opportunities. Opportunities to do what?" Someone asked. "We cannot win a military confrontation. They have too many ships, too much firepower, too much technological advantage." Maria Volkov entered the chamber. She had been granted special access to brief the Council directly. "We cannot win a conventional war," she agreed. "But wars are not always won conventionally. We have advantages they do not expect. We know our world better than they do. We are unified in a way they have never encountered. And most importantly, we have nothing left to lose. They have already killed millions. If we surrender now, those deaths accomplish nothing. If we fight, at least we fight for their memory." The Council voted again. The decision was not unanimous this time. 12 nations voted to surrender, arguing that more death was not worth abstract freedom. But 173 nations voted to continue resistance. Director Chin delivered Earth's second response to the Dominion, and this time there was steel in his voice. "Legate Zarthian, you have murdered millions of our people. You have destroyed one of our cities. You have shown us your power, and our answer remains the same. No, we will not surrender. We will not submit. Do what you will." Humanity stands defiant. The transmission ended. In the Dominion fleet, Legate Zarthian stared at the screen in genuine disbelief. His staff officers looked at each other in confusion. This had never happened before. Species did not continue refusing after a demonstration. It violated every pattern, every prediction, every assumption built into Dominion military doctrine. "Contact the Sovereign Assembly," Zarthian ordered. "Tell them the humans have refused again. Tell them we need authorization for complete planetary sterilization." He did not want to make that request, but he could see no other option. These humans would not bend. Perhaps they could only be broken. The response from the sovereigns came within hours. "Legate Zarthian, you are authorized to proceed with subjugation operations. However, complete sterilization is not approved. We need this world functional for integration. Break their will, destroy their capacity for organized resistance, but leave the infrastructure and population base intact. We will not waste resources on total destruction." Zarthian understood the calculation. A dead world had no value. A broken world could still provide tribute. But breaking this world was proving more difficult than anyone had anticipated. He gave the orders to his fleet commanders. Begin planetary assault. Target military installations, industrial centers, and government facilities. Minimize civilian casualties where practical, but prioritize speed and overwhelming force. The Dominion fleet moved into assault formation. They began systematic bombardment of Earth's military infrastructure. Defense stations exploded under concentrated fire. Shipyards became expanding clouds of debris. Naval bases disappeared in plasma fire. Within 6 hours, Earth's conventional military capability was reduced to scattered remnants. But the Dominion discovered something unexpected. The humans kept fighting. With their major bases destroyed, they fought from hidden facilities. With their fleets shattered, individual captains conducted suicide runs against Dominion vessels. With their command structure disrupted, local commanders took initiative and continued resistance. Captain Volkov was on Station Horizon when the Dominion attack reached her position. She watched 3 cruisers approach, weapons charged. Her station had minimal armament, designed for coordination rather than combat. She could run, but there was nowhere to go that they could not follow. "All personnel to escape pods," she ordered calmly. "Evacuate immediately. This station is lost." "Captain, what about you?" Commander Santos asked over the comm. He was back in orbit after escaping Jakarta. "I have a different task, Raphael." She began entering commands into the navigation system. Station Horizon was old, built in the early days of orbital construction. It was large, heavy, and equipped with powerful maneuvering thrusters designed to adjust its orbit. Volkov had spent the last 4 days running calculations in her spare time. She knew exactly what those thrusters could do if pushed to maximum power. The last escape pod launched. Volkov was alone on the bridge now, watching the Dominion cruisers approach. They were moving slowly, confidently, certain of their victory. They had destroyed dozens of human installations already. One more made no difference. Volkov activated the thrusters at full burn. Station Horizon lurched forward, accelerating toward the lead cruiser at increasing speed. The Dominion ship tried to evade, but it was too large and too close. The station, massing several thousand tons, slammed into the cruiser's midsection at tremendous velocity. The collision tore both vessels apart. Debris exploded outward in a sphere of twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. The other two cruisers barely avoided being caught in an expanding wreckage field. Captain Maria Volkov died instantly in the impact, but she took 300 Dominion crew members with her. Commander Santos watched the explosion from his damaged patrol ship and felt tears stream down his face. She had known exactly what she was doing. She had calculated it perfectly, and she had given the Dominion a message. Humans would trade one life for many if that was what victory required. Similar acts of desperate courage occurred across the system. Commander Lisa Zhang rammed her crippled destroyer into a Dominion supply vessel, detonating both ships. Lieutenant Marcus Ford stayed at his gun position on a burning station, continuing to fire until the structure collapsed around him. Civilian volunteers flew unarmed transports into Dominion formations, disrupting their tight attack patterns and creating opportunities for military vessels to strike. The Dominion was winning the battle, but they were paying a price they had never paid before. They had expected to lose perhaps a dozen ships during the entire subjugation. Instead, they lost 47 vessels in the first week alone. Humans were throwing themselves at the Dominion fleet with tactics that made no tactical sense, but extracted a cost for every victory. Legate Zarthian reported the losses to the Sovereign Assembly with growing concern. Sovereigns, the humans continue to resist despite catastrophic casualties. They are employing suicide tactics and guerrilla warfare. Our losses exceed all projections. I recommend we withdraw and reconsider our approach. Unacceptable, Sovereign Venkar declared. We do not retreat from primitives. Increase the pressure. Begin targeting population centers again. Break their spirit completely. But something else was happening that the Dominion had not anticipated. Word of Earth's resistance was spreading through the tributary networks. 643 enslaved species were learning that someone had said no to the Dominion and survived, even if only for weeks. The news traveled in whispers, in hidden broadcasts, encoded messages passed between worlds. On the Velcari homeworld, a conquered species had served the Dominion for 800 years. Young warriors began meeting in secret. They discussed the human broadcast they had intercepted. They debated whether resistance was possible. For the first time in generations, they imagined freedom. Engineer specialist Yuki Tanaka worked in the Deep Space Monitoring Station Kepler, far from Earth. She was 31 years old, brilliant with communication systems, and had spent the last week doing something that would have seemed impossible days earlier. She had cracked the Dominion's encrypted communication protocols. Dr. Park, I have it. She transmitted on a secure channel. I can read their orders, their logistics reports, their tactical communications. We can see what they are planning before they do it. Park, who had relocated to an underground command center in the Swiss Alps, felt hope surge through his exhaustion. Yuki, this changes everything. Can you broadcast on their frequencies? Yes. I can send false orders, jam their communications, or feed them incorrect intelligence. What do you need? All of it. Confuse them. Blind them, make them doubt every order they receive. Park began coordinating with remaining military commanders. With Tanaka's access to Dominion communications, they could finally fight smart instead of just fighting hard. The effect was immediate. Dominion ships began receiving contradictory orders. Attack squadrons flew to empty coordinates while their real targets went undefended. Supply vessels diverted to wrong locations. Formation patterns dissolved into chaos as different ships followed different instructions. The Dominion fleet, which had operated with perfect coordination for thousands of years, suddenly found itself stumbling in confusion. Legate Zarthian realized something was very wrong when 3 of his cruiser groups nearly fired on each other due to conflicting identification codes. Someone had penetrated their communications. These primitives, who should not have been able to understand Dominion encryption for decades, had cracked it in less than 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Ambassador Mara Ose was conducting her own mission. She was a diplomatic officer who had spent her career building relationships between nations on Earth. Now she applied those same skills to an interstellar scale. Using the communication channels that Tanaka had opened, Ose began broadcasting messages to the tributary species. People of the conquered worlds, This is Ambassador Amara Ose of Earth. You have heard that we refuse a dominion. This is true. They have killed millions of us. They are winning the military battle, but we have not surrendered. We will never surrender. And we want you to know something important. You are not alone. If you choose to resist, you will not stand alone. Earth stand with you. The broadcast reached dozens of worlds. Most governments ignored them, too afraid or too broken to respond. But individuals listened. Small groups formed. Whispers became conversations, became plans. The Dominion had maintained control through overwhelming force and the perception of invincibility. Earth's defiance was cracking that perception. On the Morvian homeworld, a species that had served as technical laborers of Dominion for 3,000 years, Engineer Kathis heard the human broadcasts. He was old and had long since given up hope of freedom, but he remembered the stories his grandparents told of the old days before conquest, and he began to wonder if those days could return. Kathis accessed the shipyard where he worked, building vessels for the Dominion fleet. He had security clearance and intimate knowledge of the construction processes. He began making small changes to the ships being built. Nothing obvious, just subtle flaws in the power systems, weaknesses in the hull plating, errors in the navigation computers. Flaws that would not show up in inspections, but would reveal themselves under combat stress. Similar acts of sabotage began occurring across the Dominion's industrial base. Production slowed. Quality declined. Ships began experiencing mysterious malfunctions. The Dominion, which had never needed to worry about internal security before, suddenly found enemies within its own infrastructure. Back in Earth orbit, the battle continued. The Dominion had destroyed most of Earth's surface military capability, but the fighting had not stopped. It had merely changed form. Commander Santos led a fleet of civilian ships retrofitted with improvised weapons. They hit supply lines, ambushed isolated vessels, and disappeared before the Dominion could respond. Admiral Foster, operating from a hidden command center on the moon, coordinated what remained of Earth's organized military. She had perhaps 20 combat-capable ships left, but she used them with precision. Every Dominion ship that separated from the main fleet became a target. Every supply run became an opportunity for ambush. The Dominion could not be everywhere at once, and Foster exploited every gap in their coverage. Dr. Park made another crucial discovery. Analyzing data from destroyed Dominion ships, he found a pattern in their shield frequencies. The shields were incredibly powerful but operated on a limited range of frequencies to avoid interfering with each other in fleet formations. If human weapons could be tuned to specific frequencies, they could bypass the shields entirely. Engineer Tanaka worked for 72 hours straight to modify the remaining human weapons. It was delicate work requiring precision and creativity. But when she finished, Earth's weapons could hurt Dominion ships in ways they had not been able before. The next ambush destroyed 2 Dominion cruisers before they understood what had happened. Legate Zarthian watched his fleet strength decline day by day and felt something he had never experienced in 2 centuries of service. Doubt. The humans should have been crushed by now. Their world should have been begging for mercy. Instead, they were adapting, learning, fighting smarter. They had penetrated Dominion communications, discovered weaknesses in Dominion shields, and turned suicide tactics into effective strategy. And worse, the tributary species were watching. The Velcari had begun small acts of sabotage in their industrial sectors. The Morvians were building flawed ships. The Atherin Collective, pacifists who had never raised a hand in violence, were providing intelligence to humans about Dominion fleet movements. 800 years of Dominion control was beginning to crack because one species had said no and refused to stop saying it. The Sovereign Assembly convened an emergency session. The 5 ancient beings faced a crisis unlike any in their long reign. Sovereign Talmor spoke first, her voice cold with controlled anger. How has this happened? How have we allowed primitives to resist for 4 weeks? Why have we lost 116 ships to a species that should have been conquered in days? The humans are unlike anything we have encountered, Zarthian replied via transmission. They do not fight to win. They fight to make us pay for victory. Every ship we destroy takes one of ours with it. Every position we take costs us casualties. They are trading losses at a rate that would bankrupt any rational species, but they do not seem to care about cost. They care only about making us bleed. Sovereign Venkar leaned forward. Then we must change tactics. We must show them that continued resistance only increases their suffering. Begin targeting population centers again. Kill enough of them, and they will break. But Sovereign Talmor held up a hand. Wait. She had ruled for thousands of years and had seen many rebellions crushed. But she had also learned to recognize patterns. If we escalate a genocide, we lose regardless of the military outcome. The tributary species are already showing signs of unrest. If we demonstrate that we will exterminate species rather than allow defiance, we create martyrs. We prove that accepting our terms means only slow death instead of fast death. We validate resistance. The chamber fell silent. Talmor was right, and they all knew it. The Dominion had maintained control through a careful balance of overwhelming force and the promise of survival under tribute. If they proved they would kill species entirely rather than accept defiance, every tributary world would have nothing to lose by rebelling. The calculus changed when submission and resistance led to the same outcome. Then what do you propose? Venkar asked. We cannot allow them to continue defying us. Our authority across the entire sector is at stake. Talmor considered carefully. We offer them modified terms. Reduce the tribute demands. Allow them limited military capacity. Make it appear that their resistance achieves something. Then once they accept, we gradually increase the pressure over decades until they are fully integrated. We play the long game. Zarthian listened and felt cold certainty settle in his mind. The sovereigns were adapting, which meant they were worried. The humans had forced the most powerful empire in the galaxy to reconsider its approach. That alone was a victory of sorts, even if Earth ultimately fell. But Earth was not finished fighting. In the underground command center, Director Chunwei gathered the remaining leaders for a final decision. They had been at war for 4 weeks. Their casualties were approaching 50 million dead. Most of their cities were damaged or destroyed. Their military capability was nearly exhausted, but they had also bloodied the Dominion fleet badly and inspired resistance across the tributary networks. We have received a transmission from the Dominion, Chen said. They're offering modified terms. 20% tribute instead of 40. 3 million laborers instead of 5 million. We can keep a defensive military. They claim this is a compromise based on our demonstrated courage. It is a trap, Admiral Foster said immediately. They will use modified terms to get us to submit, then gradually increase the pressure until we are fully enslaved anyway. Dr. Park's research showed this pattern in 12 previous cases. So we refuse again, President Koslov said. And they kill another 10 million of us. Another 50 million. When does it end? When we are free or when we are dead? General Webb replied. Those are the only 2 endings a story can have. Everything else is just delaying the inevitable. Commander Santos, who had been given a seat at the council after his actions in Jakarta, spoke quietly. My grandmother told me that freedom is not something you are given. It is something you take and then defend every day for the rest of your life. We took it 4 weeks ago when we said no. Now we defend it, however long that takes, whatever it costs. The vote was taken. Once again, Earth refused. Chen delivered the message personally. Legate Zarthian, we have considered your offer. We reject it. Our answer remains no. We will accept nothing less than complete independence and the withdrawal of all Dominion forces from our system. We understand you may kill us all for this position. We accept that risk. Some things are worth dying for. Freedom is one of them. The transmission ended. Zarthian sat in his command chair and realized that the humans had won something important even if they eventually lost everything else. They had proven that defiance was possible. They had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could bleed, and most critically, they had demonstrated that some species would rather die free than live in chains. The war would continue. The Dominion would likely prevail through sheer weight of numbers and technology. But the age of easy conquest was over. Every tributary species now knew that resistance was an option. The careful balance of fear and submission that had maintained Dominion control for 9,000 years had been disrupted by one word spoken by one small blue world. No. And across 643 enslaved worlds, beings who had forgotten the taste of freedom began to remember, began to hope, began to plan. The Dominion had come to subjugate humanity and instead had awakened something far more dangerous than one defiant species. They had awakened the idea that defiance was possible. On Earth, Commander Santos stood on the surface and looked up at the stars where the Dominion fleet waited. He thought of Captain Volkov, who had died ramming her station into an enemy cruiser. He thought of the millions who had perished in Jakarta and a dozen other cities. He thought of the soldiers, sailors, and civilians who continued fighting against impossible odds. "We are probably going to die," he said to the young lieutenant beside him, "but we are going to make them remember us. We are going to haunt their empire for thousands of years. Every time they demand tribute from another world, someone will remember that Earth said no. And maybe, just maybe, that memory will be worth the price we paid for it." The lieutenant nodded. "Then let us make a memory they can never forget, sir." Above them, the stars shone cold and distant. The Dominion fleet waited in the darkness, preparing for the next assault. And on Earth, humanity dug in deeper, sharpened their weapons, and prepared to continue a fight they knew they could not win but refused to abandon. Because some words once spoken cannot be taken back, and some choices once made define everything that follows. Humanity had chosen defiance over submission, death over slavery, and freedom over survival. Whatever came next, they would face it on their feet, not on their knees. The galaxy was watching, and the age of unquestioned Dominion control was beginning to crack.